Obi, were you just saying something? I couldn't hear you.
You're muted.
I said, yes, I am. It's genetic.
Is
And
it?
it's genetic. And the other thing is you'll never know if I'm angry with you.
All right, team, you're being live streamed.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Well, while we're waiting for people to join, there was a brief conversation this morning in terms of the county commission and moving meetings to hybrid, partially in person versus remaining remote. So Tricia, keep us informed about what you all decide.
I will.
Although I know several commissioners. Huh?
I know. There's some that are just like, don't want to do it. And I just think it's so much, I don't know. I mean, I understand it's easier and all of this with Zoom, but like even today meeting, it's just, I feel just, it's like more productive and more intimate and all of those things.
It's trade-offs. It's almost, it's hybrid is worse than all remote or all in person is the problem. So
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good point.
But at least the county has pretty good stuff for hybrid. I mean, I actually, when we do those workshops hybridly, at least I think you can hear me because I'm always coming in, remotely, etc. Castle Valley, we haven't done anything hybridly yet, but as we used to be, somebody be in Salt Lake for the meeting, literally they had a phone that they would pass around to each of the speakers so that the person could hear them, and then nobody could hear the person who was coming in remotely. I mean, it was crazy.
Putting the speaker on the stool in front of our seats and screaming into the center of the room wasn't much better. Though I think the county has come a long way.
They have, indeed.
Conversation about doing some test runs before anything goes official, so we can make sure.
Oh, and Emily, good luck on your campaign.
Thank you.
Mary's going to collect, my wife is going to collect signatures down by the mailboxes in Castle Valley tomorrow, and somebody else is doing it today.
Thank you, Bob. And thank you to Mary. We're still waiting for people to trickle in. Oh, wait, is there 4 of us? We have a quorum. It's 4:31. I think we should call to order and take care of these first few things. So 4:31, I will call this meeting of the Grand County Planning Commission to order. We have OB, myself, Steve, and Josie in attendance. Makeda is not likely to join, at least for the first hour, because she's traveling. And I have not heard, there's Tony. I haven't heard from Rick. So there's 5 of us now. Okay. So we will start with citizens to be heard. And I don't see anybody on the call besides for those of us plus staff, but Laura, or is that Laura or Jenna behind Grand County Planning and Zoning?
This is Jenna.
Jenna, is there anybody in the waiting room?
Just Laura. She's coming on now.
Perfect. So we'll go ahead and move forward and look forward to our second citizens to be heard at 5:30 if there's anybody who wants to make a comment. So we'll move to ex parte communications and disclosures. We do have a public hearing on the agenda today. Does anybody have any disclosures to share or ex parte communication? Okay, seeing none, we'll move forward to approval of meeting minutes from February 14th. Are there any comments about the minutes?
Yeah, I had a couple now, if I can get onto the right place. And the first one I'm not sure of. I think it's page 4 in the packet, and down 1, 2, 3, 4 little dashes. And it says that the county possibly is selling off surplus housing, or was that surplus property?
It's surplus property. And that's all just, this is all just kind of in theory, right? So right. There's a lot of properties, but there's 3 properties in San Juan County that we are talking about possibly selling. And then the thought was we could utilize those monies towards a property that would be used for affordable housing, or, so one is, there's a couple pretty large chunks. There's one is like a 40-acre chunk. One is a 20-acre chunk. So pretty high valued pieces of property that are still in the valley here. And then one's like an acre and a half or something. And it's kind of this weird triangular shaped piece of property.
So I bet that I didn't go back and listen, but I'm going to guess that probably should then be surplus property. The other one is just a simple one, page 6, up about 4 lines from the bottom, and it says WUI considerations, but it's WOEY rather than WUI.
Thanks, Opie. I'll make those changes.
And those are the only 2 things I found.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other comments about the minutes? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I move we approve the minutes with the 2 changes.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Was that Tony?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so a motion by OB, second by Tony to approve the minutes from February 14th. All in favor, raise your hand, and for commissioners with your video off, say aye.
Aye, Steve Evers.
Okay. Tony?
Aye.
Perfect. That is unanimous. And we will move on to our update from Trish and the County Commission.
Oh, great. I don't have a ton. Our last commission meeting was fairly bland, except for we talked about the Entrada development, and that was denied. There was quite a long discussion, and I actually don't remember the vote. I think the vote was unanimous. However, in the end, they said if they came back and it came back with the conservation easement intact and assured housing, which we know we can't do, that pretty much it would pass. I still had issues, one due to the, as we've talked about, overnight accommodation to resident ratio. I still have issues with that. And then actually we met with Mark Stilson from the Division of Water Rights, right? He's the engineer for the Southeastern region. And when we talked about water in that portion of the county, I mean, on the east side of 191 right there, there is absolutely no water, none. I mean, he said on the west, I'm sorry, vice versa, on the west side. On the east side, there's some water, where the current glamping and that development, the latest well that was dug was 1,000 feet deep. So the water is deep, but there is some water. There's absolutely no water on that west side. So I still have issue with, and this is just my kind of my spiel, that you're attempting to put in a development based on unstable water sources, meaning if they're going to haul water at any time a load out, so for example, if they're going to load out a Thompson or groundwater and sewer, can cease, loading out water if they have any issues, right? And so I just think it's something, and I talked to Mark about that, and he's like, yeah, I agree with you that it's hard to base a development on unstable water sources. So anyways, we denied it, but basically with this caveat that if they came back with these pieces, that it would probably go through. So anyways. And then we met.
Doubling up on that real quick, Trish. I do think planning commissioners, it's worth going to YouTube and watching that discussion. And I know we're going to get some more direction from the county commission after their meeting tomorrow. But just given some of the discussion about that particular project and with regards to other OAO projects that might come before us, I just wanted to interject. It was very, very eye-opening and interesting to see the different perspectives across the commission represented. And I just want to recommend everyone take the 20 minutes or so to watch through it. So just sorry to interject. I just wanted to call that out.
That's okay.
I'd only interject one other thing. I will want to watch that. It'll be very interesting. I don't think the Planning Commission is very far off from probably the majority of the County Commission it's that interesting thing, of course, because we did say we want that
know.
land preserved, et cetera. And of course, the kinds of arguments I think I read about in the newspaper, that is the ratio being very important. Here we are opening up some new stuff, all that land put away with very little development on it. It's
Right.
one of the things we might want in 191, but I will look at that. It's a very interesting topic.
Mhm.
Yeah, it is a really interesting topic. And I mean, this idea that, and I think both Mary and Kevin said that it's kind of the least evil, if we could get that conservation placed on it. But I don't know. That's a tough one, right? We don't know. And so it was a really interesting conversation. Kind of talking about water for a second, we did meet with Mark Stilson from the Department of Natural Resources, Water Resources. He's from Price. He's the state engineer. If you haven't had a chance to meet with him or speak with him, he's just amazing, don't you think? Would you agree, Obi? You've kind of are shaking your head.
Yes, I've met with him a lot because I do a lot of water stuff, and he's very available, and he attends the Moab Area Water Partnership meetings. Interesting person, of course. He has his own views probably on development that might be a bit different than mine,
Right.
but he's good on water.
Yeah, good on water. And so he really came to talk to us about a few things, but in the end, we really kind of, and I'm not going to get into it, we talked about the Colorado River Compact a lot. And, water rights that are secure because they're post Colorado River Compact, which that number is somewhat in debate, but let's say 1929 compared to pre-Colorado River Compact. I won't get into all of it. I would kind of send you to a reference if you want more information. So Utah State University, the future of the Colorado River Project. This Jack Smith is kind of the guru of the Colorado River and Colorado River Compact. So if you're interested in that, I think it's pretty interesting to look into. That there's a lot going on, and basically he said a lot of the local municipalities, we're all of our water rights spin around 1950s ish, which basically said doesn't make your water that secure. They need to be way earlier than that. He made that very clear, but he's very, very interesting. He did kind of elaborate on the concept of groundwater monitoring here in the Valley, and that we're just ever, the more monitoring we can do, the better position that we'll be in. And the idea that actually you can do it on your own private well, that the division would couple with you, and for about $5,000, put it in a monitoring site on your well. It benefits them, it benefits you. And so that's kind of an interesting concept, just throwing that out. And then lastly, and Emily was at that meeting today, and I don't know, Emily, if you want to talk about that with the Book Cliffs Highway, I'll kind of let you talk about that maybe down the road, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's return to that during future considerations. And actually,
Perfect.
I'll probably have Elisa
Sounds
take the lead on that just to kind of make sure we're using the right language between the different groups involved.
That sounds good. Okay, that's it for me.
Great. Any questions for Trish? Okay, so we will move on to our public hearing for this evening. The applicant is here, which is great. Let me get down to this place in my packet. So this is a public hearing to consider and solicit oral and written comment on a rezoning request proposing the application of the general business zoning district to property located at 15 West Old Highway 6 and 50 in Thompson. And one thing to note is you'll notice, but below the proposed motion that staff puts in our packet, that there's a whole bunch of bullets in there. If you haven't had a chance to watch the discussion around the Entrada application, one of the things that the county attorney raised is that the county commission does need to have a justification as a legislative decision. They don't have to say, they have the choice of approving or denying these types of applications, but there is language in the code that the reason for that determination does need to be included. Staff has included these in their packet and in their report in the past. But Elisa and I talked about just raising these up to be a little bit more visible. You don't have to touch on every single one of these when making a motion. But we also hope that this will help contextualize any recommendations that we do send forward to the county commission, who then can make their own decision and determination, but also add some additional context and should aid them in the framing of their conversation. So just wanted to call that out now so I don't have to get into that in a moment. Okay, so public hearing, what we'll do is have our staff report. We'll invite the applicant to make a statement. Then we will open the public hearing for any public comment. Following public comment, we'll close the hearing and continue our discussion, putting a motion on the table before anything substantive. So Elisa, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'm gonna attempt to share my screen. So Jenna, I think you have to allow me to share my screen if you can. Okay, so this is a general rezone request to change from range and grazing to general business on the parcel. The owner is Sana Carey. She is the applicant and on the meeting. The parcel is 1.83 acres and it's located it's actually right next to the parcel that we had a public hearing on and a rezone request at our last meeting, which was John Corkery's property. So they're right next to each other. And I will show you that here. Also in the packet, but yeah, so this is the Desert Moon and they had their general rezone request for the same thing, range and grazing to general business. So the property currently consists of 5 existing structures, including the historic cafe on the corner and several dwelling units and accessory structures. Historically, the site was used for commercial purposes. And in terms of consistency with the general plan, the property is within the future land use designation of range, resource, and recreation, which encourages residential development as well as recreation, resort development, agriculture, and development of extraction of natural resources. And while not proposing future residential uses, the rezone request to general business is consistent with the intent of range, resource, and recreation future land use designation, in that the future proposed uses at the subject property are intended to give a variety of commercial uses that would accommodate tourism and local residents in a commercial setting, including entertainment, food, and retail. The property is also within the rural center future land use designation, which is intended to promote neighborhood scale retail, small businesses, local commercial, local tourism, on-site renewable energy, and residential neighborhoods. The mixed uses that the property owner is proposing would be consistent with the rural center designation by providing a variety of mixed uses, promoting tourism, small business, and local commercial. While not a requirement of a rezone application, the Planning and Zoning Department is requesting a water analysis for property owners applying for rezones in Thompson Springs due to the current moratorium on new water connections with the Thompson Special Service District. The submitted analysis completed by the TSSD demonstrates that there is not currently a water account connected to this property and that the TSSD cannot supply water for future development until the state of water resources for the Thompson area changes. While development cannot occur on the subject property at this time, the TSSD recommended that the county favorably consider this rezone application, as there are efforts currently underway to address the water deficit such that the TSSD will be able to provide water connections at a future date. As far as issues for consideration for approval, denial, or postponement, I'll just touch on a few of these that are in the staff report. The existing zoning of range and grazing may have been adopted in error, as the historic principal use on the property was commercial and the location of the property is within the town center commercial district. The Thompson Springs area is undergoing many changes of late, including a replat of the entire town to improve street design and the general layout of lots. A land use analysis is slated for this summer of 2022 to evaluate zoning for the entire town. Historically, Thompson experienced a boom and a bust and is now on the upswing of that, showing signs of being a viable commercial and residential node, of course, within limitations of water availability, outside of Moab and just off a major interstate freeway. The community may gain benefits of revitalization, as the rezone may encourage renovation of rundown structures and general cleanup of the area. The rezone will also provide local retail services, a restaurant, cafe, and a venue for gathering and outdoor entertainment. Staff does not believe the rezone would constitute spot zoning, as the subject parcel is adjacent to light industrial and across the street from highway commercial. So that's what I have for the staff report. If anybody has questions on that.
I have some that I'm going to withhold for discussion after the applicant's statement, though. If the applicant chooses to make a statement, I would love to know a little bit more about just how they're looking at water given the current constraints, just kind of how that's feeding into their application and justification for application. So with that, yes, thank you. Saw this in the packet. Are there any other clarification questions for staff? If not, I'll ask the applicant to invite the applicant to make a statement. Sana, are you there? Am I pronouncing?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi.
Sana, would you give us your full name, and then you're welcome to make a statement. You're not required to, but if you'd like to address the commission, this is your opportunity to do so.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Sana Carey, and I purchased the Thompson Cafe last May, I think, March, April, May, whatever it was. And I knew the past owner, and he died a couple of years ago, and he was unmarried. He owned it with his brother, who was also unmarried. They both died within a little bit of each other a couple of years ago. So the water was actually turned off on the cafe just because there was nobody, and the heat was turned off. The propane was turned off just because there was nobody there to maintain or to keep an eye on it. The only living relative was his brother, who lives in Pennsylvania. He contacted me and wanted me to list it. It had, because it wasn't maintained, the roof started to leak. And I was able to get someone to put a new roof on it, so that at least the building was stable. So it did have water in the past, and actually the water went to 3 structures from the water meter. We're only requesting one building, which is the cafe, to get back up and running, with water. And then the water line feeds into what was called the boarding house. We're not going to have it as a boarding house. We're going to have it as a little mini mall. And there's a lot of people in Thompson that make like handicraft stuff. And they've expressed an interest to having little gift shops in that little area. It kind of looks like, the building kind of looks like the White House without the front porch. So we're going to call it the mini mall at the little White House, kind of a take on Washington, D.C.'s the mall at the White House. So that's what we're planning to do. We're planning to do some events once a month from probably April to October, called the Third Thursday. And that will be because there's so much land there that's empty. It used to have 10 or 15 junky, beat up old cars. They've all been removed. We've been in the process of cleaning up that property ever since I bought it, and it's looking a lot better. We're painting buildings, putting new roofs on structures, and getting it because that's the main corner in Thompson. When you come into Thompson, you have to pass that no matter which direction you come into Thompson, north, south, east, or west. So it's already starting to look better, but we need to get your approval on the changing of that zoning back to commercial, business commercial, to move forward on some of the interior updates. So anyways, the third Thursday that we're going to be having from those months, it will be kind of like a farmer's market, a little flea market. We'll have, it will be from 4 to 8. So it's not an all day long thing. It's not 2 or 3 days. It's just 4 to 8. And we're going to have little stage between the boarding house and the cafe. And we'll have like bubblegum blowing contests and hula hoop contests and hacky sack contests and, you know, just different things for little kids to do and, you know, adults and that type of thing. We're going to have poetry readings, fireside talks without the fire, one instrument solo. So it's not going to be a band. It'll be like one instrument solos on the stage. And the stage is only going to be like 8 by 12. So it's not, you know, it's nothing real big, but we're going to be bringing a little bit more activity to that area to kind of liven up a lot of the people. All the people in Thompson either work in Green River or Moab. And so they're driving anywhere from an hour and a half round trip to 2 hours. And this, I've had quite a number of people in Thompson request that when I open up that I look at their applications so they don't have to travel quite so far, or even a part-time job. There's a little bit of employment at the RV, and there's a little bit of employment down at the gas station. So we're going to be introducing more jobs and a little bit more activity. There's unbelievable amount of traffic going up into Sago Canyon, which is a ghost town, and Thompson Canyon. So, you know, to give that area a little bit of a boost, I think it would be probably a good thing.
Thank you very much, Sana. Did you want to add? I'm sorry.
It's got a little garage. We're just going to leave that as a garage, you know, for lawnmowers and yard tools. It's got another little building. We call it Tim's building. And we either want to turn that into like a little chapel, or because there's, you know, the closest church is Green River, or a little workshop, which would be basically a place that you can buy little RV parts. Because as RVs travel down the road, they rattle, and all of a sudden they've got a loose screw, or they've lost their, you know, pipe that goes into their septic, or whatever it happens to be. So it may be a little bit of it's the same thing. It probably will only be open from 4 to 8. And the reason being there is everybody's out playing during the day. And so that tends to be, serves two purposes. One, it would allow people that have part-time jobs or jobs in Moab to come and make a little extra money in town. And secondly, you don't have to drive all the way to Moab to get a screw or a part to your RV, or if you want to cut a board, you could rent a skill saw, you know, that type of thing. So it will service the area a little bit more, but it's not a big Walmart type of a development. I don't know. Does anybody have any questions? So basically the bottom line, it used to have water. The water's hooked up to it. We had it checked to make sure that the pipes are good. We cut open it's all copper piping. I was thinking we wanted to go with PEX, but the people that I've had go down there, they said, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. And they looked at the pipes through the request of the building inspector to see if there's any buildup of any, like, I don't know what, buildup of chemicals or buildup of, not algae, but buildup of whatever. And they're clean, they're clear. We ended up adding a clean out a ball valve for a drainage on it. So that's the only thing we've really done is check that the water line is secure and that it's in good shape.
Great. Well, thank you for your statement. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant at this time that are specific to their statement?
So we're
Okay.
not increasing, we wouldn't be increasing the water usage. We would
Right.
actually be decreasing it because the Little White House used to be a boarding house with 3 bathrooms in it. We've taken out 2 of the bathrooms. We only will probably have 1 bathroom if we have to for a ADA bathroom. So we would be using probably less water than we did before in the past.
All right. Well, it is 4:58, and Sina, if you want to stay on, you're more than welcome to. I will open our public hearing. If anybody would like to make a statement about this application, this is your opportunity to do so. And I don't see anybody in the room that wouldn't be part of commission staff or the applicant. Laura, is there anybody, or Jenna, is there anybody in the waiting room?
I see no one.
Okay. So we'll just give that 20 seconds or so, just in case anyone's trying to join from YouTube. I don't think we're seeing anyone come in. And did we have any public comment that was written that came in after the packet deadline?
We didn't receive anything in our department, no.
All right. So with that, we'll close the hearing and we'll move on to any further questions for staff or for the applicant from the Planning Commission. And anybody is welcome to make a motion at any time.
Do you mind if I ask a question, Emily?
Please do, Trish.
Dana, when was that water turned off? Do you know when that was turned off?
Well, his brother, who took quite a while to try to get it through probate, obviously because he was in the back east, they turned it off because there was nobody paying the bills and he didn't have the authority. So it was been off for a couple of years, but he died about, I want to say 3 years ago. So there was an outstanding bill which has been paid to the water, Thompson's Water District, but so a couple of years. For some reason, my sound, I think, went off, but I don't know.
Oh,
We heard
we're
you.
here. And at this point, I think if there's no questions for staff or for the applicant, I'd ask for somebody to make a motion.
Can I clarify just, and I don't think I stated this in my staff report, but I want to just make sure it's clear that a rezone in our code does not require to prove that there's water to the property, but that is required at the site plan application stage. So Sana is aware, and we've communicated with her that basically the rezone does not constitute approval to actually develop those uses until, of course, the TSSD can provide a will serve for the water, and then she can go through site plan review.
Elisa, that reminds me, I did have actually a question I'd written down. Do you happen to know, I couldn't find it and I couldn't recall offhand, when the Range Resource and Recreation Area was designated as part of this future land use designations map? Did you find that in your staff report research?
The Range Resource and Recreation designation is part of the 2012 general plan update, so that it would have been in 2012.
And then the, where is it? The Rural Center Future Land Use Plan, that's more recent, I believe.
Yeah, I don't recall that being, in the general plan, I don't recall if there is anywhere that it says that was an amendment later to the general plan. The way I remember those future land use designations is they were all part of that 2012 update, but I could check.
I think that's right, Elisa. I think it was part of the original 2012. I don't think there was any amendments after that.
Oh, so they were there at the same time.
Yeah.
That seemed, I was trying to find evidence of that because that seemed to be in slight conflict, but sort of out of date at this point, a decade ago anyway. And as we have been looking at the general plan and general planning efforts, have we received any citizen comment or seen any conversation about this area of Thompson and its viability for business use that, might be useful and taken into consideration?
I haven't really, we haven't gathered any information like that from the public so far. Yeah, on that.
Okay.
That's coming though, Emily. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's coming. Yeah.
I know that. It's sort of, dual tracking some of these always makes it a little difficult. Thank you. That answers my questions, Elisa. So I'll entertain a motion.
I'm ready. I move to send a favorable recommendation to the county commission for the proposal to rezone the property located at 15 West Old Highway, 6 and 50 in Thompson Springs on Grand County parcel number 07-0021-0073 to general business zoning district based on one or more of the following considerations, if that should be part of it. It does seem to be in this rural center of the future land use plan, which is important because it seems therefore to be what our planning suggested it might be. It seems to be at the only four-way stop in town on Old Highway 650 and 94. And it seems to be in the past, a place that was commercial. So I think it's actually probably a pretty good place to have general business and seems to fit with our future land use plan.
Okay, is there a second?
I will second that motion.
All right, so we have a motion in favor of a positive recommendation based off of the feasibility of the proposed use with regards to previous planning and future considerations, made by OB, seconded by Josie. We'll have to work on the right way to state that to go to the county commission, but I think I captured it given the list below. So OB, you had a chance to sort of share your justification. Is there anything else that you want to comment on?
No.
Okay, Josie, did you have any additional comments?
Also not being at the last meeting, but knowing that a little bit of precedent has been set by rezoning the adjacent parcel. And I agree with OB that, in as much as Thompson might feel like it has a town center that might be like a nodal thing, this does feel like it, having passed to that area. I do think that moving forward, it does seem like Thompson needs a little bit more of a vision moving forward and an analysis of all the range and grazing parcels to see if this might not be the only rezone that might happen to encourage kind of similar smart growth in as much as Thompson has water for that to happen.
And Emily, I might add one other thing. I do like the how the water's been handled. It's very clear from the letter from the Thompson Special Services District, and it seems clear that the applicant understands that the water isn't guaranteed, and there is a risk here. But if it does become available actually, I think they have some past people that will get water first. So I really like the clarity here.
I didn't know about the tax consideration for the underlying district change in Thompson when I-70 was built. I didn't know that historical fact. And I think that's very enlightening given the number of applications we've seen over the last several years related to Thompsons that have had historical use more in line with the requested zone that they are requesting to change to. And I can't verify how true that is, but it does make sense, and it helps to put into context why some of these uses have been there in the past, and then today, the parcel sits under range and grazing. So I'm looking forward to the planning efforts currently underway in Thompson. Josie, I know that you mentioned that, and I think that that's going to help. Just given the central location to this one, it does seem like it's a little bit more black and white. I think we should be mindful of considering precedent when it comes to additional parcels in Thompson that aren't as centrally located, but this one does seem to sort of be a bit right down the middle for me. Is there any other discussion or comments?
I can clarify one thing if you can still hear me.
Sana, I'm so sorry, but because we've opened the hearing and closed it, we are in discussion.
Okay, all right.
So, but I think what we'll do is we'll move forward with discussion and then move to a vote on this issue. And then we have citizen comment at 5:30. If you do want to add in any additional comments to the record prior to this moving to the county commission, you're more than welcome to do so at that time.
Okay, okay.
Thank you so much. Are there any other comments or discussion from the commission, or Trish, you're welcome to weigh in as well before I call for a vote? Okay. All right, so let's call the question. So there's a motion by OB, seconded by Josie, to send a favorable recommendation on the parcel, the property located at 15 West Old Highway 6 and 50 in Thompson Springs, to change the zone from range and grazing to general business. Did I say that right? Okay, great. So all in favor of this favorable recommendation, raise your hand. Say aye. Steve, the only person I
Aye.
can't see. All right, so that is 6 in favor and 1 absent. Great. And Rick joined us midway through that discussion. Hello, Rick. Welcome. Okay, thank you so much, Sana. You don't have to stay. If you would like to stay on and make another comment at 5:30, you're more than welcome to, but we're going to move on in our agenda.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
So this moves us to staff updates. And it looks like the first of this is an update from Laura on the Spanish Valley survey.
Yes, hi everybody. I think I'll keep my video off just with my internet last time. So hopefully you can hear me all right. I don't have too much of an update, but just wanted to send all of you those updated surveys, and we specifically the full-time Moab and Spanish Valley residents. So in the packet, you'll just see the results from all full-time Spanish Valley residents in Grand County and San Juan County. And then there were also some folks who took the survey who live in Grand County, but not Spanish Valley. Those in there, 50 results, actually maybe
Laura, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Your audio is going in and out again.
Yeah.
But I think we got the gist of it.
Yeah.
So let's just, if there's any questions for Laura or for staff in general about the survey, go ahead and ask them. And then if there's a lot of back and forth, Laura, maybe you can call in on your phone, but unless there is discussion, it's probably unnecessary.
Sure.
I have a question. What percentage of, I guess, residents of Spanish Valley, either San Juan County or Grand County side, have responded? Do we have an idea of what that percentage is and what's remaining?
I would have to check those numbers. I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah, but I can get that back to you at some point.
I think, Laura, we had 2,500 mailouts, didn't we?
It wasn't quite that high. I think
No?
it was about 1,800.
And we've had how many responses?
We've
Discrete
had about 450.
That's a pretty
but-
high percent.
Yeah, and
But you
it's
don't,
some Spanish Valley, some not. So I don't know fully. Yeah. Yeah.
But we are going to be promoting the survey at our public open house on March 3rd. So definitely, handing out the little mailers and encouraging folks to take the survey.
Yes. Yep.
I know anecdotally, I've heard from some renters that they're not aware of the survey, just because it sounds like, were the mailers sent based off of tax address? So if somebody was renting from an out of town owner,
Exactly. Yeah. So it wasn't perfect, but that was how we were able to the addresses. So
If anybody knows anyone who's renting or knows anyone who might be talking to people who are renting in that area, verbally share the word. And I know I talked to several people this weekend and many of them were not aware of the survey. So I think keeping it open and continuing to share it would be great. Tony?
This is more rhetorical and less of an actual homework assignment. So this isn't exactly what it sounds, but just speaking rhetorically, I'd be fascinated to compare the survey responses of landlords to their tenants. I don't know if that's a thing easily done with a computer. I'm not a statistician or a planner, but that would be neat to know. That's all. Just more of a hypothetical, really. I don't think I know this stuff costs money, and we've already gotten halfway through it, and it's not part of our plan. But maybe in future large-scale community surveys, if there is a way to build that, to get that granular, I would be curious.
Yeah, so we're working on that. If I could just jump in there, Emily. If you don't
Go
mind.
ahead, John.
Yeah, we're working on a community-wide survey. In fact, we were hoping to have that ready before this. So, but we just decided we'd just go ahead with the Spanish Valley survey because it's important, and we want to move ahead with the community-wide survey, which would have a full range of socio-demographic stats in it, and get at what you're trying to address, and then feed off the census as well. Of course, there's a lot of good data there too, as long as you can disaggregate the data. It's hard to do that with a census because it usually includes zip codes, and it's hard to disaggregate that.
yeah, and I just wanted to add, taking the data and starting to parse out like the neighborhood planning based on the data that we're getting. We're gonna kind of start focusing on that after the public meeting. And like Elisa said, we'll have the survey open and available for folks to take it also on Thursday. Yes, I think that's all I have.
So I will share, Tony, that I took the raw data. I wanted to see not just the raw data comparisons, but how that mapped to the percentage of people who responded under each category. So Laura in the PDF shared the crosstabs at the numeric level, but that dashboard that I created helped to look at the relative percentages. And a couple of things that stood out to me in looking across it, and I want to add this new data into it and see if it holds. People who lived full-time in Grand County in Spanish Valley versus people who lived part-time in Spanish Valley, Grand County, or people who lived outside of Spanish Valley and Grand County, you started to see some differences in opinion that were pretty interesting. I don't know if it's enough to hang anything on quite yet, just at the number of responses. But some things that came out were there's was some slightly more or slightly higher favorability towards multifamily housing, rental-oriented housing specifically for people who lived in the area full-time versus people who didn't live in that area full-time, as well as some interest in different commercial uses. Other uses were pretty consistently not favored in that area by all groups, and that held for both uses at the 191 corridor and outside of the 191 corridor. And so I do think it's reasonable to assume that there are some differences between people who live in the area and feel the impacts full time versus people who perceive the impacts to that area. But I think we'll have to follow up with that with a lot more citizen comment, but that's something that particularly stood out. All right. Any other comments for Laura? Otherwise, we'll move ahead in staff updates to Elisa.
Thank you. Okay, so the next staff update has to do with our land use code updates. And we did have a good discussion at the February 26th General Plan and Land Use Steering Committee, where we brought up, I kind of presented most of, more than what's actually on this one, on this agenda summary, but I think from that meeting, I've gotten a little bit better direction to focus really on the housing issues first. And we're going to be also talking about all of the updates that are being considered right now at the county commission tomorrow, to also get more clarity on kind of prioritizing the different sections to be updated, because there are a lot now, and they're getting kind of, we're adding ideas, and I think it's going to be good to have a little bit more of a prioritization. So the county commission presentation from staff tomorrow is not going to be going into this detail that we're talking about tonight. It will just be a brief overview of kind of the full list of land use code updates that we've been collecting over the last few months, and then to have the county commission kind of point us in the direction of what we should be focusing on first, and doing the research and pursuing. So, so they haven't really seen that full list yet, and so that's why we're doing that. But the planning commission, of course, we've been talking about these land use code updates. I've presented them over the last few months. So I figured we could kind of keep going in that direction, assuming that we're going to be working on housing first. And specifically to start out with the ADU section, since that does need to be updated for the Utah State Code requirements anyway. That seems like a pretty straightforward prioritization. And within that update, within that section in the code, there are some issues that we could consider in terms of adding the possibility for folks to have an internal ADU along with one detached external ADU on one parcel, which would be basically allowing three families to live on one parcel that would be maybe only be allowed one single family dwelling for basically like rural residential, a large lot residential, and that would also go for small, is it small lot residential? I can't remember that, the smaller zone, but so that's one issue of consideration.
Did you want to take us through your deck? Would that be easier? I don't know if it's more clearly laid out through that.
Possibly, yeah, we could definitely look at that. I have
might be
it
helpful.
here. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, these are the bullet points that that I presented to the February 26th steering committee last week. And so some of these are the kind of the real sticking points that we'd want to decide on in terms of updates to this section. And I think I do have in here some of the information on what Moab City did, but they Moab City's recent updates to their code in terms of ADUs was a little more extensive in terms of allowing additional detached ADUs on one parcel. So we wouldn't, I don't think we would maybe want to go as far as that, but to allow an internal ADU along with an external. So essentially an internal ADU would not be allowed to exceed the footprint of the existing principal residence. So you wouldn't really see in terms of a visual impact this extra ADU on a parcel. But one thing to consider would be requiring an additional parking space on site, and then to require that the owner must occupy either the internal ADU or the principal residence in order to prevent it from being a duplex. Another consideration is to possibly reduce the side and rear setbacks for external ADUs where the height would not exceed 20 feet. And that would just allow for ADUs to actually be built on parcels that currently the setbacks are such that they cannot be built. And, so this would basically encourage more construction of ADUs, which would increase our housing stock.
So planning commissioners, if assuming the county commission does direct us to more critically look at this issue and the other ones that Elisa is going to run us through, we will be able to debate and discuss the merits of some of these different options, along with seeding citizen comment. What we were thinking would be helpful would be to provide any guidance that we feel should be emphasized to the county commission in discussion tomorrow, or anything that's missing from this list. So, for example, during the steering committee meeting, I suggested that I actually think we might consider relaxing the parking space requirement, and that I think it'd be worth getting some, direction on whether or not we want to start playing with that part of our land use code in order to maybe make it easier to construct this type of unit. So, and Elisa, correct me if I'm wrong, or if I'm taking this in the wrong direction, as far as the type of feedback that would be helpful to you and to staff to go into tomorrow's conversation. But I don't want to get into a debate on the merit of these particular items, other than just to ask if there's anything that's missing or anything that should be emphasized, or maybe potentially, some different options put on the table. Does that sound right, Elisa?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just jump in there, Emily? I think one of the things to remember too is there's short-term, medium-term, and long-term questions we're asking. So some of this may not be done in the short term, shorter term being 3 months. Longer term, we would align this. The goal is to redraft the whole land use code, all the sections, all the zones that are there, permitted uses as well as conditional uses, and align them with the general plan, including the land use strategy. So and that's kind of a midterm thing. The longer term one is actually the whole housing reevaluation analysis, density bonusing, those tools. Maybe some of that can be in the midterm as well. So it's not like these are lost necessarily if they're not done right away. Just to say that.
And the ADUs in particular, though, we need to look at with regards to state code to some degree. And so the question is, how far down that path do we want to go while we're touching on it? Yes.
Right. We could just go, in the direction of only including the required definition for an internal ADU, which we don't have that in our code. And that's the state code requirement. Mm-hmm. Is to basically define the internal ADU in your code and the regulations for that. But yeah, we could keep it as simple as that and not go into this idea of allowing an additional one on the parcel. So.
And I see in bullet 5, we currently deed restrict. I was speaking with County Commissioner Walker, and we both looked at the land use code, and I didn't see a reference to deed restriction. Do we specifically deed restrict it, or do we simply, how does it work today? And could you just clarify how the city approaches that restriction on ADUs?
Yeah, so I noticed that in our section under ADU in our code, it doesn't define the deed restriction. I can't remember what it is, but it's a little bit misleading. But there is something in our code that basically requires the ADUs to not be used for nightly rentals. And so in our application for an ADU, when folks come in to apply for that, the deed restricted form is attached to the application, and it's clear that they have to go through that process, so that it's deed restricted to prohibit the ADU to be used for any time less than 30 days, for a lease period of less than 30 days. And so I know with Moab City, they've gone beyond that, and they've actually deed restricted ADUs for workforce housing for actively employed households, which they're kind of, Corey, when he was on that meeting that last week, he mentioned that they're considering changing that because they feel like they might have done that in error, because it's creating a lot more work in order to track and qualify folks for, to be actively employed households, and that it also excludes people that don't work, that may be retired, but they still live here full time. And so, yeah, there's just that to consider.
So anticipating that that will be a topic of discussion tomorrow, or a point of some discussion, anecdotally, so I don't know how accurate this is, but I have heard of people saying that they've seen ADUs that are, the main home is owned by a part-time resident and the dwelling unit is used sporadically, either by their guests or by people coming into town. And while they didn't have evidence that this was a paid dwelling unit, it does seem to, that sort of use adds density to our neighborhoods and changes the character of our neighborhoods without benefiting the community. And I wonder, if there's a wiggle space to explore requiring that one of the two is occupied full-time by a resident of Grand County. And like I said, I don't want to get into like the merits of each of these, but that's one that I imagine will come up for some discussion tomorrow. And I would really love to get some specific direction from the county commission on where they would like us to press, or the types of uses that they are seeing these take that they would like us to particularly look at. And then the second one I think would also be worthy of some further discussion is our parking requirement specific to these. And I think that's something I would love to see us look at in the short term if we are increasing our definition to include internal accessory dwelling units. Just largely given, as long as we are restricting the use to benefit our workforce and our local residents without impacting, or overly impacting the character of our neighborhoods, I think parking is one that could allow for this use to proliferate without that increased burden. But I realize that comes with a lot of potential costs and trade-off, and getting some specific direction from the county commission between those two would be very helpful.
Okay. I just found the section in our code under 3.3B. At the very bottom, it has occupancy requirements, and it says, where an ADU exists, neither the primary nor secondary dwelling unit shall be occupied for periods of less than 30 consecutive days. A restricted use covenant shall be signed and recorded by the owner prior to issuance of a building permit for the ADU. So we do have it in there for that. And I thought that we had something that required either the principal or the ADU must be occupied by must be a primary residence. So I'm not sure where that is, but I'll have to look a little further, because that could be a potential loophole. We don't have that.
Yeah, if I could add another anecdotal tidbit, which is that, and I've heard this very recently in relation to some of the newer townhomes in Moab City, which is that sometimes people take that 30 days as a loophole to do like one vacation rental a month. So they might do like a week-long stay, that theoretically is for the month, but they make a lot more with that week of vacation rental than they would with like a resident workforce member. I also agree that erring on the other side a little bit too much of requiring like certain workforce credentials or for like retirees, or they are called in-laws for a reason, and certain other things which may restrict a lot of different kinds of people who are part of the Moab community. I almost wonder about just making that 30 days longer. I think some of our workforce and affordable housing language is more of like a 90-day requirement, and I don't see why we couldn't do something similar for ADUs if we are intending for them to be primarily local residential housing.
Yeah, that's definitely been discussed in terms of increasing the period of time. I think 90 days would be good for sure. The Utah code does not prohibit us from doing that, so we could do it.
All right. excited to hear more about where that one lands. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next assured housing.
Yeah, so let's see if I can scroll down. Okay, so the idea around section or Article 6 and Section 6.14 and 6.15 is basically 6.14 is our current assured housing section, and that we've all kind of come to conclusion that it's not working. We're not able to really apply it to have affordable units constructed or a fee in lieu paid by a developer due to the fact that it was put in place after a bunch of hotels already got their development permit. And so we couldn't retroactively apply it to those. And then we did away with hotel development shortly after adopting the assured housing ordinance. So, and we're also really running into problems applying it to single family dwellings at the building permit stage. So far we haven't really been able to implement it. And the idea came about recently to look at an affordable housing requirement for all new development, which is based on a recent ordinance that Summit County adopted and are starting to use. And it's basically inclusionary housing. It would be very similar to the assured housing, but it would expand it for all development. Of course, some exemptions would be there, including construction of ADUs, principal residences. And then I put in there that we could address the original intent of the assured housing section in terms of single family dwellings was to charge a fee or require affordable housing for homes that were kind of extravagantly large and maybe second homes. So that's why I put in the principal residence under 3,000 feet question mark. I don't know if we want to keep that in there. We could evaluate that. But and then of course schools, I'm not sure if we should exempt schools though, because schools do create the need for housing. So, but it does seem kind of unfair because it's a public institution, and then churches. So yeah, those are kind of some of the current bullet points around replacing the assured housing section with an affordable housing requirement. And it would take a bit of time to update our nexus study and all the data that created the linkage fee and the justification for the assured housing section and kind of apply it to a larger set of development, but it's very doable, and we could use the same methodology that was used in the nexus study that was done in 2018 to kind of create that whole section. So that's the idea behind that one. And I did start a draft integrating the Summit County's model into our code, just to kind of see if we could start getting a working draft going. And if we like the idea of it in general. So.
And then the surcharge was suggested by a county employee, but hasn't undergone any research, but it might be worth just touching on that concept.
Yeah, so Bill Hulse from building, he suggested this idea of just simply applying a small percentage surcharge or an impact fee for all building permits across the board. And it could be from the very smallest building permit to, the really large, costly ones. And over time, we would get enough funds collected that we could implement programs on the ground for affordable housing. And that could be an array of different solutions. It could be anywhere from buying property and then working with developers, or, working with our land trust, that kind of the things that we're already doing and kind of increasing those activities.
And I think the question for the county attorney with that one is, given the fact that assured housing doesn't apply to vested properties, because this would be tied to building permits, not all of which have been submitted, then there may be an opportunity for us to take that pretty big backlog of these overnight accommodation properties in particular, and ensure that we're able to provide housing to our residents in order to offset the, impact from them. But there needed to be a little further study from there. Did I capture that right?
Well, yeah, just in terms of an impact fee, I think we would need, I know Chris Baird is working on capital studies. John probably could explain that a little bit better, but that would provide the justification and how to create that fee. So I think some time would need to be invested in researching and creating the justification for it.
Yeah, I think one of the things you need to do is take a look, you need to do an analysis, an impact fee analysis for all capital improvements. And obviously housing is a big one. So transportation, sewer, water, stormwater, parks, recreation, those are all big ones. So you need to have a good justification and analysis that's done legally to be legally defensible. And then that would have a list and a schedule of charges. So that's not unusual to happen. The only thing that's unusual in Utah for me is impact fees normally don't apply to general fund questions like fire stations, police stations, and I realize we're not dealing with that, but housing tends to be a little bit on the outside, but it looks like Utah law allows for that.
Trish, did you have a comment?
Oh, just that, when we were talking about the groundwater monitoring the other day, we brought up the idea of impact fees for new developments, and that, if you attached a fee that would go directly to groundwater monitoring, right? So I think it's a really interesting idea that could go to quite a few funds.
Yeah, and that, why I put this idea under kind of a midterm solution, and only because we could implement something on the ground in our code pretty quickly in terms of the Summit County model, but something along the lines of an impact fee might take a little longer to figure out how we would do it. But then in terms of actually seeing the result of all of that and the funds coming in and being collected over time, it would be kind of a longer term solution where you would actually see the results, not happening like right away. So it's something to think about. Well, we got to start somewhere. So the sooner the better.
Yeah, quick question, how, because I'm assuming that the impact fee would, I think as John said, be on a schedule, so it would be adjusted for the scope of the building project. How would that be determined? Or is that still being figured out?
Yeah, so it would be, normally it's done on impact of, on a specific service. So for example, the simple one is if you're adding more sewer and more water to the system, that impacts not only the distribution system, but the supply or processing system. So those are capital improvements. And because of that, you can actually charge per additional unit that you're adding. You can do the same thing for housing. You could say that if you're adding one unit, then you'll have to have 10% of that has to go into some type of affordable housing. I'm not making it sound simple, but that's the kind of calculation that would be necessary.
Okay, and similarly, would this have exemptions for things such as ADUs or, because I guess that's kind of a capital project, or would that just be under the?
Yeah, Josie, the rule, sorry, Emily, through you, sorry, I'm going through the chair here. The importance is to make sure that if you're adding impacts, that's really what you're measuring. An ADU is an impact. It's an impact to sewer, it's an impact to water, it's an impact to parking, it's an impact to transportation, roads, and it's also an impact to housing. Now, it might be a positive impact actually, because you might be encouraging more affordable housing by doing that. So that's one of those things you have to calculate carefully.
Right, and I think there was Bill had brought up the idea too of if you were to, we could have something in our code that says if you're deed restricting this dwelling unit for to be only used for workforce housing, or if it was already an affordable unit where it was a below market rate, affordable unit, then you could maybe get a waiver on the fee, on the impact fee.
John, it's okay to step in. Most important for me is that you both are getting what you need in order to drive to the right outcomes in tomorrow's conversation with the County Commission, knowing that there's so much we could be doing and we won't be able to do it all at once. I think the thing that the commission is hungry for is direction, clear direction from the County Commission. So please step in and move the conversation in the direction it's needed to get any discussion or outcomes you're looking for. So to any other commissioners, I know there's one other item as part of this overview that Elisa is taking us through, but are there any additional comments related to assured housing, affordable housing requirements, and so on, that we would specifically like feedback from the County Commission on and direction from the County Commission on?
You know, Emily, I'm gonna make a comment, and I hope it's not substantive and it goes back. I'm violating all the things you just laid down.
Nope, go for it.
Goes back to the first one, which is the only thing I'd mention to Trish is, as you look at the model for Moab, in terms of how many ADUs you can have, an external and an internal on 6,000 acres, I believe, if I'm not misreading stuff, it may not be appropriate to the county because Moab in theory is to be a dense, but that's the only thought I kind of had that might be general thing to consider.
Yeah, OB, I definitely recognize that there's going to be a difference in how the county wants to apply, you know, additional ADUs for less dense areas. I think that the city, I'm trying to look this up right now, but I want to say they're actually allowing on larger lots, there's a threshold for that. I think it's 20,000 square feet that they would allow 2 external detached. If you weren't going to do an internal, you could do 2 external detached ADUs on a parcel. But I'm going to verify that right now. I think there was something a little bit more than they were doing besides just allowing the internal with an external.
I think 2,000 was correct. I kind of know it because I looked up an acre, which is about 4,500 square feet. And that's another way to think about all of this. If you think of how many units can go on 6,000 or 10,000 or whatever they're doing.
Yeah, the 20,000 is about a half acre. So.
OB, you raise a very interesting point, and that's that in our HDHO 5, areas in particular, having 2 accessory dwelling units is really only 2 units off, and you start to get to that territory. And I think knowing that we're waiting for litigation to wrap up before we go back into that topic, maybe this, beyond what is required at the state level, should be part of that broader conversation about density outside of the, immediate fringes to the city. And I think also, when I say substantive, I didn't necessarily want us to get into debate about, 6,000 square feet versus 5,000 square feet and so on. But I do think it would be great to know from the county, is density something that they want us to explore, or are there areas they particularly want us to explore that they want us to identify those nodes first or those areas first before we start looking at any, potential changes to the underlying code related to ADUs? Do they want us to put an emphasis on workforce housing or housing that is more likely to be incentivized for rentals, which I know, in the critiques I've heard about HDHO, one of the biggest ones is you've gone and you've created a bunch of single family homes, but you haven't made, sauce of the rental problem. We don't have, rental properties. And I realize that's been part of this broader question with some of the developers brought up. So that's kind of more the areas that I would really like some direction from the county commission, is not just what to prioritize, but in what order. And is there anything that needs to block anything else? Like, are we not willing to go further on this question of density of any type before we identify these specific nodes and move forward with a planning process to say, this is where we are willing and open to potentially upzone to higher density, and this is where we are not. When we did the HDHO, it's sort of blanket and just like all the potential nodes, I think having a more intentional process probably makes sense, but that's the kind of thing I'm looking for direction from the county commission on.
Yeah, it was definitely on my mind. And I think that the city is kind of moving towards this a little bit of really, rather than having a one size fits all ADU policy, of really looking at different zones and making appropriate recommendations. And I think that that's in our interest too, because I do think there's such a large difference between like rural residential lots and more dense neighborhoods. And so I think you want to consider different setbacks and different height requirements, and, you know, possibly allow more ADUs with larger lots, but in a way that still keeps that, you know, rural character, if that's where we're going with the Spanish Valley survey and some of the objections against the high density housing overlay. And it also wasn't lost on me that, you know, in some ways ADUs could be a more palatable replacement, at least in the immediate, for an extension of the HDHO, because it can allow some infill of hopefully affordable housing for workforce without creating essentially a zoning change for a lot of those areas. So I do think it's worth just really looking at all of those, especially with the active Spanish Valley survey and a lot of the feedback already as to what is desired in many parts of Spanish Valley around density. But I could see ADU allowances being still very compatible with the desires in those lower density areas if we can take all of these considerations in.
And if I could just jump in there, Emily, one of the things I think that's important too is think lot coverage, because that's density too. And you probably know this better than I do, Josie, but I would say that the city's approach to making sure that they don't extend the size of the building itself, the footprint, for the principal building, and then the accessory building, which could be a garage. You guys say garage, I guess, but the garage would be that there's the setback provisions in the rear setback would allow for potentially a garage to be converted, although 20 feet is pretty short to get 2 stories in. So you'll almost get the granny flat situation where it's not so much bigger lot coverage, because it would be almost looking at the same kind of thing you'd see in single family areas, but you'd have more density there. And that way the lot coverage is still the same.
John, we don't use granny flat either.
No, you don't? Okay. Why don't you use that? Grandpa, granny? Oh, that's not gender neutral? Okay.
Our Canadian language lesson of the day. Always, I love it. If there's no further discussion on this topic, so first, I mean, Elisa and John, it sounds like you have what you need. Trish, if you have any clarification to us as far as things we would love direction on, you know, jump in. Otherwise, let's move on to the next, that third item.
Okay, yeah, and I had created this map. Are you seeing the map?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Just to show that, you know, pretty much every parcel, according to our parcel map, is you would be able to build ADUs on all of these parcels, essentially, if we were going to allow, you know, well, we already do allow ADUs with parcels that are 5,000 square feet or more. But in terms of allowing an additional ADU, that would be something to consider, is the size of the parcel, because otherwise, I mean, it's across the board. There's really very few small lots that are under 6,000 square feet or 5,000 square feet.
And I'll just note, just for some context, historically, when we started looking at HDHO and the various areas where the staff at the time felt like, you know, different densities could be palatable, it was very close to blanket coverage of any undeveloped lots, because, you know, many of these lots rather have some development on them. So obviously that was a slightly different can of worms, but I just think we should be hypersensitive to that. We heard some very clear concerns around traffic flows. And while, you know, yes, it's true, not every single undeveloped lot would necessarily become a 25, you know, units per acre development. You could see higher build out of ADU units, and that could have an impact on traffic flows. So this seems like something that could lead to some slippery slope questions that would need to have answers before we started to ask our neighborhoods and our citizens to, you know, open the floodgates. So that's just something I think we should be very cautious and conscientious of.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I will move on. I'll go back to
Emily, I'm just wondering if there's a point of order here. You're past 5:30, almost half an hour, and I think Sane is
Oh,
hanging
John,
around.
gosh, you know what?
Oh.
I'm so sorry. And thank you so much for raising that. You're right. Let's do that and let's pause here. And I wasn't watching the clock. You're right. It's 5:52. We're delayed in our citizens to be heard. If you would like to make a comment, now is your opportunity to do so. Put your name or say me in the chat. Or if you'd like to, you're welcome to just come off of mute and state your name. Sana, I know that you had stayed on after your application. I so apologize if you've been waiting to speak again. If you were sticking around to make another comment, now is your opportunity. And if you're just listening in, that's fine as well.
Yeah, just a real quick,
I'm so sorry. Go ahead. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, the real quick question of why it was turned into range and grazing. It used to be commercial, but in the 80s, when I first came to Moab and started working here, I-70 did not connect between Green River and past Thompson. And so that was the only route, and it was the normal route. Once I-70 connected, Green River and Thompson kind of dried up. And so the people that were in Thompson requested a zone change for a reduction in tax purposes. The reason I know that is 39 years ago, when I was first interested in buying that property, the woman that was showing me the property assured me that they still, the price would work out, that they still had some, business that would verify the price that they were asking. I couldn't afford it at that time, and that's when my friend Jay ended up buying it, and he owned it until he died, and then I bought it. But that was why they changed the zoning from commercial to range and grazing. Was just because the highway didn't connect. Also, the train used to stop there too. They stopped stopping there, and they changed to Green River. So because of the hotel and the cafe kind of both shut down, the train stopped stopping there and going to Green River instead. So that's a little back history. That's it.
Dana, thank you so much for staying on and sharing that history with us. And I apologize that we're 20 minutes into past the time what we normally would have had our citizens be heard. So thank you so much. That's very helpful and clarifying as well.
Yeah, well, I appreciate finally figuring out how to do Zoom. So that's why. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening. We really appreciate you staying on to share that. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Cheers. Thank you. And I don't see anybody else who I would expect beyond just the staff and planning commissioners. But if you are here to make a statement, feel free to jump in, and we're going to move on just because I'm not seeing anybody. But I apologize again for being late on that. All right, Elisa, I'll turn it back over to you to take on that third item. And John, thanks for point of order. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll share my screen again. So on our steering committee meeting, we discussed these other options that have been on the table as well, which would be potentially more kind of an immediate solution. At least the camp park idea would be more of an immediate solution that we would see some results on the ground relatively soon to provide workforce housing. And so we've talked about this idea, and I know that there's been some interest in it in terms of allowing a camp park for long-term housing. And I guess the question for staff right now is this something we're still interested in? And if so, what's the kind of direction we'd want to go with it in terms of, because I think we could have some flexibility in designing it in a way that would be palatable. Because I think that the resistance to this idea comes with kind of these preconceived notions of camp parks maybe being just a bunch of RVs on a huge tract of land, and this is not very attractive, or whatever those kind of preconceived notions are. But there's there's definitely tiny home communities that are coming up all over the country, and there's some really good examples and good design standards. And so, maybe we don't need to focus so much on the idea of RVs necessarily, but tiny homes. And I did get to talk with Bill Hulse today about the permitting of tiny homes and how they work with the building code. And he said basically, if the tiny home is built like a stick built structure and it's built on a foundation, then it does constitute like an actual, there is an appendix in the building code that would address tiny homes, but they still have to meet some of the requirements for normal homes. So you can't, for example, have like a really tiny bathroom. You still have to have like a standard bathroom within a tiny home if you're going to go through a building permit process. But he said that the way to get around that is if you allow the tiny homes to be in a camp park where it's essentially like he would permit that like an RV used for long-term living. So it would be the same kind of process for the building department to review a tiny home that was maybe, not up to the building code standards, but it would be used for, I think he's even said the term long-term camping. But I know, we don't allow that right now. So that's kind of something that we'd have to kind of work around and figure out how it would work with our code and how we would want to change things. So, yeah, I guess would like to hear your thoughts on if this is something we'd still want to pursue, if I should do some more research and bring some solid examples from other areas that are implementing this.
I think it's really interesting. I know there's a company out of Cedar City called Zip Kit Homes, and there's a line of them. I've seen some down in Hurricane, and they're attractive and they're, very dense. And I don't know what their insulative value is, but what concerns me about RVs, and let me tell you, I've lived in RVs for extended periods of time, is they're just so energy inefficient, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's the rub. I mean, they're also not very attractive. I mean, but the energy inefficiency is concerning to me.
And I'm a tiny home supporter because I think it becomes real affordable housing. Not affordable housing that house only costs, $260,000 and somebody might be able to pay for it. And there are great examples. I know, and you probably know this also. I mean, Eugene, Oregon has, fine tiny homes. And I think they're attractive and they are affordable.
Yeah.
And I would say, I don't know what the deal is with the building department, but certainly in other areas, they've figured out how to put tiny homes in, meet the building standards. Maybe they change the standards somewhat, but it's got to be a solvable problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bill is basically saying that it's very solvable, and he is totally for working with us on it and helping to come up with the standards so that it's compatible with our process.
Yeah, Bob, the ICC has provisions for tiny homes now. The old standard was minimum room size, ceiling size in order to avoid slum housing, which was appearing in, the northeastern parts, never in Moab, of course, but in, places like New York, in the old.
There's no slum housing here.
Exactly, yeah. So the idea was to try to make something livable. So that's why they had minimum square footage and minimum ceiling heights. And those were codified for a long time.
What's our code say about composting toilets? Is that something that we could look at alongside this so that, there could be a sustainability question, especially I mean, to me, all of these things seem so interrelated. I mean, looking at ADUs without looking at tiny homes or even potentially high quality RVs that meet a certain standard. Seems like those two shouldn't be decoupled. And I also would love to, well, I'll go ahead and just ask the question again. I don't know what the standard is for composting toilets. I've heard it brought up, but I haven't actually doubled down and looked into it myself.
Yeah, I've never seen any reference to that in our code. I have a feeling that we don't address it. That the code is silent on composting toilets.
I'd want to make sure that we ensured that they would be allowable. Obviously, I realize there's higher standards there, but I think of tiny homes not just as something that can help us expand our available housing stock, and so many of them are sustainably built. They are manufactured to be efficient and to be cost efficient, to be energy efficient. And I think if we can also combine that with water-wise standards, we have the opportunity to potentially, really make an impact in our housing issue without interjecting with a lot of other costs associated with density.
I think composting toilets might be a conversation that also involves the health department.
Yes,
Totally. That's what I'm saying. Is I don't want to lose it in the conversation, but I think it's something we should just not take for granted and not assume. But I would love that to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, and I think that there's more interest in that now than there has historically been. And I do think that there have been some sort of like pilot, programs of doing things like composting toilets, but it just hasn't been put into general use yet. And I would like to say, I mean, in general, I really like pursuing this direction and finding kind of the path of least resistance because, I understand the kind of low hanging fruit of RVs, but I wouldn't want that to be, the hill that we die on. And, because similarly, I know a lot of people who live in their vehicles who I've surveyed who would be happy to have like an established place with centralized amenities where they could continue to live in their vehicle. And I would be for that. I don't know how much resistance that might get in general. And if that resistance is there, I'm interested in, also not dying on that hill and just finding the things that appease people's sense of aesthetic. Cause I do think a lot of it does come down to aesthetic, certainly noise. And like you said, impacts around water and waste and traffic. And so I'm absolutely for finding the right fit for this, this kind of scenario that can be palatable to the most amount of people so that it could actually possibly happen.
Tony?
Yeah, I'm going to echo exactly what Josie just said. The appropriate path forward is whatever option makes as many housing insecure workers in this community housing secure. That being said, as a person who rents and works in Grand County, I think a lot about equity, which is different than equivalence. I think a lot about equity, and I continue to be concerned about a working class pulley that is crammed into as many small housing units as possible, and a wealthy taxpayer pulley that lives on 40,000 square foot lots. That's about an acre, right? So when we talk about housing, we also have to think about labor and social stratification. And the future of Moab that I have in my mind has equity be a part of it. I've seen beautiful, stunning tiny homes that are really quite, a lot nicer, more energy efficient, better places to live. I'm the kind of person you ask me, give me like space on my lot for a garden. I don't need a big living room, right? So it appeals. But at the same time, there's if we go this route, we need to do it in such a way that it's not just a more expensive to build like tiny crammed lots than what we already have now, because then we're just like gentrifying something that isn't right. So this has to come with opportunities for people are working from home in a tiny house. Maybe they don't have room in their home for a home office. So where like this isn't just like a housing doesn't work thing. Every facet of a livable community gets built into this. If we're cramming tiny homes into a development, we probably don't have as much room for parking. So where is the like bike paths? How do they connect? It's got to be holistic, and it's got to be in a way that is equitable. Anyway, that's my that's my thing. This isn't just you can't math this one with how many people can we fit on this many acres. Right. It's more calc than it is trig.
I appreciate the examples that are in the packet, and I think more of that is certainly helpful, because I think that a lot of times it is sort of quality over quantity. And it actually dawned on me today that in the kind of density versus rural character debate, I tend to think of a development like Mulberry Grove in Moab as actually being a high density, but also very highly rural in character place. And that's because it still values agrarian space. It still values open space. All of its vehicle uses and storage uses are clustered on edges of the property. And so I think those are principles that can make a significant difference with something that is higher density and serving more people at once in this kind of scenario, and can be really easily envisioned in a way that accomplishes those things quite easily.
I think it would be helpful in that regard to get, again, direction from the commission and further examples from staff to look at the trade-offs between some of the ways that these various ideas could be implemented, so that we can plan for impact assertively and assess impact assertively. So an example, the potential ADU expansion sounds like a great idea. And then my head immediately starts to see ways that it can create the same kind of impact and issues that we've been hearing residents complain about. I don't know who my neighbors are. People are coming and going. They're changing frequently. There's more traffic. There's more noise. I feel like I've lost my sense of community. And I want to make sure that anything that helps to give more people who are in our community and members of our community a home and access to the housing market doesn't come at the cost of that sort of community division. And it almost seems, Josie, you make an excellent point, a set of planned developments that creates a similar increase in the number of houses, but in a much more intentional way, could get to a similar end, but with a lot more consideration to the surrounding area. And so I don't think any of this is a discussion of should do or should not do. And I mean, just to clarify, the intent here was to give staff information to help to facilitate the conversation with commission, with the ask of giving us clear priorities and clear boundaries for those priorities to engage in the next round of planning with regards to, in this case, particularly housing, and then some of these specific issues we have to look at for state code. So I wonder if it would be useful just to, Elisa, maybe just pull up the packet back to the staff report and give a real quick playback just through these 1, 2, 3 before we move on. And I do want to get off this topic pretty soon and just move on to the rest of our agenda. But I think just going through a playbook, making sure that we're all on the same page, and Trish, John, Elisa in particular, with regards to our questions and concerns related to density, location, sort of breadth of some of these issues, and prioritization. Any other comments quickly from the commissioners? Anything I'm missing before we ask Elisa to do that, and then we'll move on? Great. So Elisa, sorry to put you on the spot, but if you wouldn't mind just kind of us playing back, I think that'd be a great way to put a cap on this conversation.
Yeah, no problem. So I kind of see well, I'll just reiterate that at the county commission tomorrow, I'm including not just the housing land use updates, but kind of all of the whole list that we've had on as an ongoing discussion, which would include the OAO section to revise that, and then also temporary uses for special events, special permits. And I think there was one other one, but anyway, they have not really seen that full list yet. And I guess there's kind of a need for them to formally prioritize housing over some of these other ones so that we can kind of feel justified in spending more time on one versus the other. But within the housing, of course, there's also these priorities that we can't do all of them at the same time because maybe that would slow them all down. So maybe choosing what's kind of more realistic to tackle first. I think the ADUs the ADU section, we do need to update that regardless, even if it's just a simple state code requirements to include the definition of an internal ADU and what we're going to require for that. And then, of course, the assured housing section and affordable housing requirement is kind of more of like a complete overhaul. I think this would probably take a little bit more time in terms of updating the Nexus study, but it is something that's relevant to the work that staff is doing right now anyway, because as we are updating our affordable housing master plan, and we're doing that with the help of our Moab Area Housing Task Force. And I know that that body was actually very helpful originally with the HDHO research and establishing the section of code for that. And so Laura she's the chair for that committee, and we've talked about kind of reaching out to that task force to kind of help and see if we can divide up some of the work in terms of the research and updating that Nexus study. So there is that. And then of course, what we just spoke about with the camp park, I just think that idea needs a little bit more research and some kind of buy-in from the county commission and what they would like to see in direct that specifically with allowing a camp park type of idea.
All right, thank you. Any final thoughts or final words before we move on in our packet? Okay, so I know that was a long staff report, but it's extremely helpful to get updates from staff, and I know you all have your hands full, so thank you, and we look forward to hearing more from tomorrow's meeting with the county commission. So this will move us on to future considerations. We have one related to the open house this week, and then we'll briefly touch on the meeting this afternoon, and then I think that's it, unless anybody else has any additional items for future considerations. John?
Okay, thank you, Emily. So a couple things, and this won't take very long. That's already, everybody always says that. This won't take very long. So March 3rd, we have, which is Thursday from 4 to 7. We're outside and the weather is absolutely beautiful. Bill Jackson took care of that, just to let you know. It's primarily outside, but the Star Court will be opened up in the inside. So we'll actually be doing a presentation in there as well. There's worksheets for the public. We've had a number of worksheets turned back in. We thought we'd get more, but we've got enough for Bill to evaluate. He's going to be holding sessions on Wednesday in the commission chambers. So if anyone wants to drop in, anyone commission member, planning commission or county commission members want to drop in, he's there to answer questions and respond to things too. It'd be nice to set up a time that you can do that because he does want to take a field trip too. So just to let you know, he's available on Wednesday, roughly from 10 to 2. The other thing I wanted to mention, besides the setup that's there and looking for public engagement, we're going to have pizza. I'll just throw that in there. Pizza will be there right at the beginning. So I don't know if that's good for everybody or not, but at least it's going to be there. The other thing I wanted to say is that the final draft of the general plan is going to be done this week. And according to me, that's according to me. I've taken all the comments I've got so far, implemented a lot of them, and put all the maps in, integrated them as much as I can. There's over 30 pages of maps. There's way too many, but I've cut it down as much as I could, and then integrated them into the text as best I could. I put a bit of an acknowledgement introduction in the beginning, and I'll be updating the implementation strategy tomorrow, which will have a timetable, resources in it, and some deadlines, which will be part of a workshop after the general plan's adopted. This is the plan. And then we'll be launching into neighborhood planning of the next year, and going out and doing grassroots planning, and then updating the general plan at the same time. So we're hoping to have that will come to the Planning Commission on March the 14th. And the goal would be to have a resolution to proceed to public hearing, which would be in April. That would be advertised, and then we still have opportunities to make changes after that. But we hope this will be a next to final draft. That way we can then move ahead with implementation. As you know, the land use strategy is being worked on right now, as the transportation plan is, the economic development master plan is starting, and the impact fee analysis is going. So all of those, when they're done, we'll update the general plan, those sections of the general plan. The general plan is pretty dysfunctional right now. It doesn't really have a lot of elements that talk to each other. The framework's there, but it really needs to have much more relevancy, and especially if the land use section needs addressed. You've touched on sustainability tonight a number of times. That's in a section in the new plan that's there, pretty central, I think, in a lot of ways. Smart growth is there. Design standards are mentioned, and how they should be managed. You've touched on design standards a number of times tonight too. So the goal is to bring that to the county commission, the planning commission on the 14th. I'm not going to be here, but Alyssa's volunteered to help present that. I knew I'd get her attention somehow. So we'll hopefully have that ready for you to look at. I'm going to try to get a hard copy ready for the March 3rd session. So you'll have a desktop copy if you want to look at one. I mean, we can run a copy of those two in print. And then we'll be posting that in a PDF without comments on it on the Google Docs, and sending it to the Planning Commission as well. So that's the goal, to move ahead with that. And sure open to questions if there's any comments or suggestions.
I'll just say, if you're sitting on your homework from Bill and haven't turned it in because you're guilty that it's late, I turned in mine tonight at 4:21. So don't let that hold you back. Go forward and plan. Thank you, John, for the update. Any questions for John? Okay, very exciting. So final item for future considerations. I'll just kind of give a quick framing, and then we can say if you want to add anything, or Trish. A small group of us met today, 3 county commissioners, myself, the county attorney, and Elisa. There's actually, you know what, Trish, you might be able to speak to the actual impetus to this, or Lisa, more confidently with regards to what's happening at the state. And then I can touch on kind of the recommended approach related to the small area plan, and then let Elisa take us home.
So the 7 county infrastructure, as you know, well, we won't go into the history, but they've been proposing the Book Cliffs Highway for about 30 years. Just recently, when I say that, it's been about 2 weeks ago, the 7 county infrastructure did submit their application to the BLM to begin the EIS process. And so that being said, myself and Mary met with Greg Sheehan. Greg is the state director of the BLM. But the great thing, he used to be the head of the Division of Wildlife. So that's great. He's a wildlife guy. And he kind of tiptoed, not really tiptoed, but stated, like, you guys need to put within the verbiage of your, he called it a county plan, basically what you want to see in that area, right? And you can kind of articulate it so that a highway is not going to conform with your plan. And so Kevin and Sarah met with Nicole here at the regional office, and she was able to give kind of a little better feedback as to exactly what we need to do. So now you can take over, Emily.
Okay, so there was some discussion, should we do a amendment to our general plan before we amend the full general plan with what we've been working on? Should we add on to any of the existing amendments in our land use code, such as our like scenic resource development plan? And the tentative thought, which Sarah and Kevin are going to draft and take forward in the way that they think makes the most sense with Chrissy, was actually to develop a sort of a pseudo small area plan for that specific area in the book cliffs where this is proposed, where we have the opportunity to cite its specific qualities, the challenges to adding additional traffic, both to wildlife and to local services, and just a number of justifications that have been brought up over and over and over again for why that area is better serving the community, the county, and just better used as a open wildlife, rural area with, light access. So, Tony, I see your hand up and I'll bring you in just a second. I do want to let you know that I volunteered your name as somebody from representing the Planning Commission that Kevin and Sarah should reach out to.
Yep.
So tell me if that's not okay with you and I'll tell
No,
them it's not okay. Great.
That's
Okay,
great.
perfect. There is some urgency here, and the plan is to bring this in front of the Planning Commission on March 28th, which means we'd be noticing it the week ahead of time. So that's the timeline that we're operating it under. That gives the County Commission the ability to have a public hearing at their next meeting and give them a meeting buffer, so 2-week buffer before they need to have it formally adopted. So that's the timeline that we're operating in, that you're going to see this move forward. There's a few other things in process that we don't need to get into that Chrissy's taking under, but we just wanted to update you. Tony, I'm going to let Elisa add anything she wants to add for clarification, or Trish, and then let you make a comment.
Yeah, I think you basically nailed it. The only thing I would add was that what we need to really focus on in the small area plan or wherever we do this update, to talk about specifically the conflicts that the highway would create in terms of the uses that are already there, in terms of like the game, wildlife, and drainage. There was a lot of some focus today also on the fact that Bill Jackson has a lot of issues with that the highway creating problems with perennial stream crossings and stormwater drainage and that kind of thing. So those are all going to be included in that.
Great. Tony, did you want to add anything or have any questions for clarification, or was it just volunteering to help out?
I was just going to share a little bit of insight here in the context of the body that is the Planning Commission. Whatever actions we take, they need to be predicated on a couple of things to understand. Right now, at this point in time, the decision whether or not this highway will be built is going to be based on the BLM's option to advance the project. This is a project being proposed to the BLM on BLM land. So whatever we choose to do as a planning commission, as a county body, should be framed and drafted in such a way as these are our feelings, recommendations, extremely strong desires. But we need to understand that this is, the BLM has a multiple use mandate that extends beyond the needs of Grand County. And this is not one of those moments where we can flex county muscle in Utah and it's going to go away. So data is going to help us a lot. The opinion of the public, if we are submitting, if we are amending plans or submitting comment, is going to get the BLM to listen to us. Additionally, knowing that Bill Jackson, that was news to me, Trish, knowing that Bill Jackson has extreme concerns about this, bringing that up to the Utah Department of Transportation is going to be vital. It's the preeminence of law in the way America works. UDOT is going to want to know what Bill has to say. Just like BLM is going to want to know what Division of Wildlife has to say. And I think also in this body that is the Planning Commission, we should also be aware that it isn't a unanimous no with the members of the public that we represent. There are some people here in Grand County who would love that highway built. So we need to, whatever action we take, be aware that it is not just black and white. We are a public body, and I really liked, Emily, the way this meeting, for the first time, when we send a recommendation, we have the preface of why we made that choice. We just need to do a very good job documenting why, with facts and figures. It is not as simple as how many people per lot are allowed to fit here, or can I run a business? From Washington, D.C. down to, Castledale, people are thinking about this.
Mm-hmm.
So we just need to dance between the raindrops a little bit.
Yes, it's a great point, Tony. There is certainly a lot of historical context to this issue going back many decades that I think we can draw from in the justification. I do think there's an opportunity to add this issue to Grand County Connects and to planning commissioners. This is a great opportunity to invite the public to send in comments now. They don't have to wait for our public hearing to send in comments, and ideally send them to commission@Grand County. I'm going to botch the email. Help me. Well, it doesn't matter. We should put it out there. Is it grandcounty.net?
GrandCountyUtah.net.
GrandCountyUtah.net. Thank you. But I think the sooner that we can be getting public comment, open-ended public comment on this issue, which I doubt should be hard since it's been an issue in this area for a very, very long time. But I think that that's a really great call out, Tony. I do know, just based off the conversation today, that the focus on justification, listening to the public, and also taking into mind the historical context of this conversation locally, as well as with our state-led partners, is definitely something that the commissioners who are drafting this are taking into mind. And I think if you're willing to be someone they can reach out to and speak with, that'd be great. So I'll give them a heads up on that. I think we should continue to raise this in future considerations in our meetings as well, to keep the public eye on this issue and invite the public to attend our citizens to be heard, but more specifically, citizens to be heard for the commission, and send emails to the commission, because that is where this is going to be adopted. We will be having a public hearing no later than the 28th in this body, though. So there will be opportunity for citizen comment then. Okay, I think that's probably, oh, Bob.
Just two very brief things. One is, you might check to see when we did our resource management plan for the state and see if there's anything in that, because we probably should have talked about that area. That would give us a little earlier precedent. And the other thing is, of course, Castle Valley worries about traffic coming down 128 in addition to other issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did look at the resource management plan that was recently adopted, and it didn't mention anything of the Book Cliffs Highway. But that was something that when we do go to update that plan, which I think needs to happen soon, regardless, that would be something to include in the update.
Right.
And Bob, just so you know, the most recent alignment, as they call it, they do want to run it across the desert in a different, they were going to bring it down Westwater. They're not anymore. It will go across the desert and hit Danish Flats exactly so that they can come down the river road.
Just so that we're not missing anything, Rick, did you have anything you wanted to add, or Josie? No? All right. Well, if there's no further discussion, I will entertain a motion to adjourn at 6:30.
I'll move to adjourn.
All right, motion by Tony. Is there a second? Seconded by Rick. All in favor, raise your hands. And that's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.